Hi, Lisa. Welcome to Revitalized Womanhood. I really appreciate you being here with me today, especially with it being after the holidays and we're kind of rushed to get these episodes recorded before I leave for Costa Rica. I really appreciate you.
Ooh, I'm happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
So I kind of introduced you before we got on here to my listeners, but would you please introduce yourself and tell us who Lisa Brown is?
Yeah, so I am Lisa Brown, and I am married to a retired lieutenant colonel in the Air Force. And let's see, I was born in Texas, raised in Colorado. My dad was a pilot. My grandpa was a pilot. We have brothers, cousins, all types of military in our family. So that runs really deep and thick through me. But we have 6 children, 4 boys and 2 girls. We've lived all over. We'll get a little bit into that, I think, in a minute. But yeah, right now we live in southern Utah, in Washington, Utah, and that's where we are for now.
And that's where I met Lisa. She is one of my amazing yoga instructors, and she's so wonderful and beautiful. And I actually all of a sudden was like, Lisa, you have to come up and do this for me at my retreat. And she was so gracious and so kind to come up and help me with that. And she's actually been pivotal in me opening doors to new people that I need to meet and be connected with. And so I really appreciate that so much. I want to talk about, I told you earlier before we get into what your specialty is and how you got into that, I want to talk about being a military wife and what that looked like for you and being a military family in different parts of the world and what that looked like and meant to you.
Oh, it's like that could take up probably the whole time.
It could.
Right? So
yeah.
We'll just, wherever this goes, because it's part of my journey to what I do today, right? So it's brought me to this point. My sister went to the Air Force Academy, which is located in Colorado Springs, Colorado. So I grew up in a suburb of Denver called Arvada. And so she was one of the, let's see, that would have been back in the 90s. Females were definitely the minority during that time. And so she would come home and mention all of the guys and how they treated females, right, and the academies and the things that she went through. And I told myself I would never, ever marry into the military and never date a military member just because of the experiences that my sister had. And funny enough, she actually introduced me to one of her classmates. And as time went on, and she said, hey, there's this guy. I think you guys would really connect. He's not, I was off a 5-year, I was engaged before this and had a 5-year relationship. I was going to get married. We had a ring, a reception site, a dress, everything. Anyways, that didn't pan out. So I was coming off of that, and she introduced me to Tom, and he was in his junior year at the Air Force Academy, playing football there. So the 2 things I didn't want was a football player and a military man. And so she's introducing me to this guy. But the crazy thing about him, and he's gold, and I'm so lucky that I found him. When she introduced us, he had just come off, I think they just lost from the University of Utah. He flew home, and so he was coming off a loss, came up to Denver. We were introduced, and he stayed with another buddy for the weekend. And he asked about me the whole weekend. He would not talk about himself. And he gave me opportunity to just blah, right? To say anything I wanted. So I thought maybe I'll give him a chance, right? So then I was actually going to school. I was a cheerleader, funny enough. So he was a football player. I was a college cheerleader in Utah. And so we just started dating back and forth, and we were dating about a year, engaged a year. We got married shortly after he graduated from the academy. And then the rest goes from there, right? So amazing, committed man to his country, to his wife, to just they learned so many core values in the military: service before self, you know, honesty and integrity in everything that we do. And I had this man that was coming into the marriage with all of those really strong core values. So, a God-fearing man and all of that. I thought I knew what the military might be like, and I was ready for an adventure, I have to say, because my dad was a pilot, so we grew up traveling, and I always loved to travel. But there was a lot that came with it now, looking back. But I think as women, we give and adapt, and we go, and we just do. And it honestly, if I were to sum it up, what was it like, as a military spouse, moving around every 18 months, 2 years? It was incredible and amazing. Of course, there's ups and downs in deployment and schooling, and you don't see your spouse, but all in all, the community, and I think probably your women would say this, you rally around one another as spouses, as families, as active duty, and you make it work. You want that community to thrive, right? So we moved, let's see, just quick if you want to know. So we started out at the Air Force Academy Prep School, and he was a coach. He was was he quarterback or offensive coordinator, something with prep school, and then he was also an assistant in the math department. And that was just a year. And then we moved to California, Southern California. He was at LA Air Force Base. I was so close to finishing school at that point, but I got pregnant, and the anatomy and physiology lab wasn't happening for me. It was working on cadavers and pregnant and sick, and so I took a little bit of time off of school. So we had 2 babies in California, my 2 oldest. So we have 6 children. So I had a daughter and then a son. They were born there. And I remember my husband feeling like he was so busy in the academy. So they take, I think, a minimum of 18 credits a semester. And it's a aerospace type, it's highly based in science and aerodynamics, just really difficult coursework. So when he got to his first base, he's like, don't know if I'm needed, right? So he went through that, and I went through leaving my family, and so we're discovering this new adventure. We were put into base housing, which was amazing. We're young, we don't have a whole lot of money, and I think we were put in, let's see, 1, 2, like a 3-bedroom, 2-story house on the water that sits right across from Long Beach. I mean, it was just gorgeous, gorgeous property. I'm like, this is amazing. But I remember looking out the window. I was pregnant with our first daughter, so Brittany. I was like 9 months pregnant when we got there. I didn't know a person, right? I was on base. I just remember looking out the window into the courtyard, crying, pregnant, thinking, how is this going to work? And my husband was off doing his military stuff. And that was a point in my life that I had to decide, are you going to step out and become part of the community, or are you going to become a victim and start to feel sorry for yourself, right? So I remember that day. But anyways, there were a lot of mentors along the way for my husband. I remember they have something called the PFT test, which is the physical fitness. You have to be, Army's pretty intense. Marine Corps is really intense. Air Force is, you got to run your 1.5 miles, sit-ups, push-ups. But he would max that at the Air Force Academy, so he only had to do it maybe once or twice a year. Once he got into active duty, he's like, I'll just kind of slide in and whatever. And then he had some mentors say, everything you do in the Air Force counts. Everything. You're fit. So he learned a lot from, you don't just come in and, halfway. So it was really great. He had some higher ups mentoring him from when he started hitting the ground running as a second lieutenant. So, and I did too. I had some spouses that really were influential to me. But anyway, so we moved from California, then we went to Ohio, and he went to school. I felt like he was deployed. I remember we were in subsidized housing. It was, again, we went from a beautiful home on the water to a home that was we were in Dayton, Ohio, It was cold. We were in the middle of a courtyard. I had to take a red wagon, 2 kids, and cart my groceries around all the way into the house. Like, it was just flipped. My life had flipped. So that's kind of how the military was. Like, you didn't know where you were going to live. And so you're, again, giving and adapting. So, and my second baby was born, and we moved, and he was colicky. And I remember putting a sheet up in between my little toddler's bed and his crib, just so it looked like it was a divided room, so they would like sleep, and just makeshifting. Like, you know, we had school tile floors. I can remember it so vividly. I think they were torn down shortly after we left because they were condensed asbestos in the walls. Just,
oh my heck.
But anyways, I'm making it sound really bad. I was grateful we had a home, like we had a place to go to. But he wasn't there a lot, and it was that I love Ohio, big farmland, open. It's just gorgeous. But it was gray and not a lot of sun, and so that was a shift for me. And I had to find things to do just to keep my spirits up. I remember one lady saying she lived 2 doors away, and her husband was a scientist. She's like, "What do you do in that house all day with your 2 little kids?" And I'm like, "I'm just trying to survive." So like we all were kind of wondering, what's everyone doing in their own little, and so
Did you never make little like book clubs or little wine nights or, you know, whatever, but
Yeah.
did you do that? Did you, like, because you said before when you were were you in Coronado? Is that where you were, out on
No.
Coronado?
We were actually, so we were in San Pedro, which really close to the cruise ships that go out to Catalina. We were right on that port.
Okay. I'm just trying to picture it, and I'm like, yeah, if you're in Coronado, yeah, that was prime.
Yeah.
Did Dayton, Ohio? Yeah, I'd be a little mad too.
Oh, we were just below Palos Verdes, which is a very incredible area. So just down the hill, and we had some properties up there with the Air Force, but yeah, so it was gorgeous. But we did have groups, but because I was so new and with babies and my husband gone, it was like, what?
You kind of went inside yourself. You kind of just created your own little bubble, and this is what I know, and this is, but when really you needed, I hear this a lot, is women they like seclude themselves. They go inside and they think that's a safe place, when really it's, you need the community, you need to open up, you need others to, you know, isn't that interesting that we think I can control this atmosphere, but really you're not controlling it, you're drowning in it, you're kind of smothering yourself in it. Mm-hmm. Is that kind of how you were feeling? But you didn't realize it. You were just thinking you were controlling it.
Well, and we need human connection, right? More than women need women.
Yeah.
And men, right? So, and I was the type of person, I'm very, like, in high school, I was athletic, you know, I was on sports teams, dance team, college cheerleading. Like, I had no problems going out and being social. I loved it, but it was just juggling the children and your husband gone, and then trying to be social. Like, you can only take so much. So I actually, every place I went, I probably had maybe a handful of really good friends that I still stay connected with. And I would tell myself, like, at first I wanted a lot of connections and a lot of friends, but I realized that I couldn't, right? And if I wanted to create some genuine relationships, I had to be selective with who I'm really opening up to with my life. And so I did find, I had an older, let's see, was she 40 when she delivered? So we both were pregnant. I was pregnant with number 2, and she was pregnant with number 5. And she taught me, Lisa, you can birth naturally. And we would walk every morning, right? So she was part of the community, and she was a little bit older. And so, yes, I made sure I found connections, 100%. But it took a minute. So the moves, it's like when you move quickly, number one, you want to get your family set up, right? And so what I did first off, every time I moved, it was kids. How can I make my family comfortable, you know? And so that was like number one. But then slowly the relationships came, and and I was always into fitness, and I am a personal trainer and exercise instructor, so I always found that as a go-to I always worked outside the home doing fitness, so that was great. But okay, I only have been through 3 places.
I know. You have 2 kids, you're in Dayton, Ohio. Then where'd you go?
Dayton, Ohio. And then we went to Massachusetts, and that was Hanscom Air Force Base. Oh, I loved it. That's when I really developed a stronger love for history and our country.
Oh, yes.
And our, yes, so we were right in the Concord, Lexington area. That's where the
Gorgeous.
The base at. Yes, it was and it was a highly funded school system. All of the kindergarten teacher had to have a master's before she stepped in. It was very, it was just a really great place to start my kids with their education. I'll just say that. So, so let's see, we had 3 children. So my third was born in Massachusetts, and it was a good time because my husband was close to home. Again, we lived on base. We couldn't afford anything else. And my husband, his work was close, right? So I could drive over. Everything was just that's the thing with Army, Air Force bases, all Marine, you have a city within, right? You've got your commissary, which is your grocery store. You've got your credit union. You've got your clinic. Everything you need is right there if you had to stay, right? But we did live off base too. Anyways, so that was a really great place. That's where I ran my first marathon, the Boston Marathon. I'll never forget that. I remember training.
Oh, you just started at the smallest one, huh?
Oh, my goodness. Nobody told me. I just had a neighbor.
God. Oh, my gosh.
Yeah, she's like, Lisa, you can do this.
That is intense.
I was like, I was a sprinter in high school. I don't know if I could, because I ran track for years. And she's like, you can do this. So I remember training on my own and doing that, and so that was a really fun experience. I have just so many great memories, taking the children to the reenactments, and just when you get to a place, what I would tell myself is this is a 18-month or a 2-year, whatever, I don't want to say vacation, but a adventure, right? You've traveled, Gina,
yep.
So you know that we make it an adventure, and so if I kept that in my mind, it's an adventure if Dad leaves. It's an adventure if, whatever. But the thing...
you gave fear a name, is what it sounds like to me. You gave your getting out of your comfort zone and your fear and your anxiety, you gave it a name and you named it adventure. So you flipped the narrative. So it was... we just got done reading this book, and in it she says, fear is your perspective of fear. If you perceive it as something scary and horrible and negative, it's going to be. But if you perceive it as something, like you're saying, as an adventure, fun, exhilarating, it's going to be that. And that's you flipping the narrative of something that you could have gone the other way with that, and some people do. They, like you said at the beginning, you go into this, I could be a victim, and I'm not going to let myself do that.
Well, and you see it in the community, going back to Ohio, we neighbored walls, all these small little units. And, there was one woman, you could hear through the walls her life. Oh. And she would never step out. And there were, police got involved. I don't know how they were treating the children. And I would cry at night because my bedroom wall would, connect with another. And so I know. That's the thing is getting, some people don't know. They don't know how to get out. They don't know how to, even though we have all these things available in the military, sometimes people just don't reach out. That's why, number one, it really is important to get to know your neighbor and not judge, right? We're all coming from different backgrounds. Our husbands each have different jobs, I think her husband was, I don't know, but I think he worked nights. Just all the dynamics. So one thing I regret from Ohio was not being more involved with her. Instead of being afraid of kind of how she was with her kids, I was afraid, I wish I were more involved. I would have now.
Well, I was going to say, that's life. because now you're you, and you would have been the person, that 40-year-old lady saying, come on, we're going to go for a walk. Come on, we're going to get that baby out of you naturally. Let's do that. That's you now, right? But at that time in your life, you were having your own battles with your own mind, with your own struggles. You were having your own battles. You cannot take on someone else's battles. And that is a choice you made, because if you would have done that, you can say, I regret that, and I feel you. I feel that. At the same time, you have to think, if I would have done that, maybe that would have taken too much of me, and I would have struggled in other ways. And Rick says this a lot. He says, you have to think of, I know in different scenarios, whatever, he says, I know you care about this, or I know you want to be good for this, but you have to think about what's most important to you first, prioritize. And if it's going to start affecting those things, right?
So true. No, that's so true. I guess another way to look at it is, it was, if I were presented that situation again, I've seen it, and I would know how to do something different. In fact, I really like this quote a friend shared. It was about 22 to 23. She said, let the tears of 22 water the seeds of 23. So it's like,
grow from those hard things.
Growth. It's just growth. You don't, I guess regret would be a strong, so if we look at it more in a positive way, let the tears, be the growth for the seeds of 23. I really liked that. So that's probably,
I like that too.
How I should have applied that. Okay, so on from Ohio, Massachusetts, which was amazing. So our third child, so we have at this point 2 girls and a boy. And oh God, it just gets busy the more children you add and the more moving or trips you have to take or whatever. So after Massachusetts, we moved to Virginia, and we built a house. We were building a house. Super excited about that.
Were you in Virginia Beach? Because that's a huge Air Force place, isn't it?
It is. We were actually in Northern. So my husband, what I love about him is he would go out and look for places. What's the best place for our family?
Cool.
And, he was really good about that. But he was up at the Pentagon, and when you hear that, that's like a mini deployment. Your husband or your spouse is not around often if they're working in the Pentagon. So we knew that would be crazy, so he wanted life really comfortable for his family again, and he did such a good job with that. We ended up building a house down in Stafford, so it's below Woodbridge, it's above Richmond, but we would travel down to South Virginia Beach, for fun, but we were more up north. So we did 2 tours up there. He did Pentagon, I think that was 2 years, and then Crystal City for an additional 2 years. And his commute was about an hour-ish to 2 hours, just depending on if he took the train, the bus, if he slugged. Do you know what slugging is?
What's that?
It's crazy. So they have a carpool lane, kind of like California, and there were different spots in each city that you lived in, and they were like parking lots, and you would hold up a sign or you would get in a line for Pentagon. That way people could hop into that carpool lane. So you're just hopping into strangers' cars.
Like shared day. Uber, but it's like shared Uber.
Yeah. So he would do that, and I'm like, listen,
I would love that. I would love that. He does need to write a book. How fun would that be?
Because there were so many. He'd come back and be like, I was in the most interesting car today. And there's etiquette. You don't talk, and so there's a certain way to present yourself into the slugging world. So he did that. But anyways, so I was pregnant with our 4th there in Virginia. And it's just amazing. We bring faith in God or whatever, a lot of people have different, we're spiritual, we believe in, God and our Savior and all of that. And we had to, at that point in our lives, we had a son that was born, and he had to, anyways, I remember him being born, and he came out, I was natural birthing, he came out with like 6 digits, which I was like, he had a half pinky off the side, and I was like, my husband and I hadn't had drugs or anything. I was in the bath. It was so totally coherent, no drugs. He's like, does he have 6 fingers? And to the nurse, and I was like, Tom, what? Over there, I heard you, you know? And he's like, no, everything's fine. Anyway, so he came out, and I was just thinking about the fingers. And we're like, how do we get those off? You know? Isn't that terrible? And then my husband was laughing. He's like, if they're functional, we'll keep them on for basketball. That's
right? That's what I just thought. The football, I mean, that's extra.
Yes. So this is you haven't met my Tyler. I'll have to show you a picture of my kids, but this is my boy who just finished his senior year this year of quarterbacking. So anyway, so the fingers were an issue for me, okay? And I had 3 healthy babies prior. My 4th baby comes out with 6 fingers on each. His toes are crossing and like this, and he is not crying. He's very lethargic. It's just little whimperings. And I remember him getting checked out. Anyways, he needed open heart surgery. He was born with a congenital heart defect, and it's called Tetralogy of a Flow. I was handed a book of multiple, heart defects that I had no idea about. Right? I mean, I studied the heart in college just generally with anatomy and phys, but I'm like, this is over my head. So it was a blessing, though. I look at this. Oh, we were in Virginia for a reason, and we had just moved from Boston, right? The top surgeon in the country moved from Boston to Virginia at that time, and
wow.
I knew of him. And so we got the other thing I want to give a plug in for the Air Force. They didn't try to bring our 4th child in and say, we can absolutely do it. They said, this is way beyond what we can do at any of our facilities, our military facilities. You choose where you want. Does he want to go to CHOP, which is in Philadelphia? You can take him to Boston. You can stay here in D.C., right? So they gave us options, which I felt that was a blessing. Amazing. Such a blessing. So that was the great thing about they took care of us like that. So Dr. Jonas had just moved from Boston, where we were, to Virginia, and he had his open heart surgery there. And so that was a blessing to be there at that time. And I still converse with Dr. Jonas back east because the West Coast doctors are different. And so I always go back and say, hey, what do you think about this? And he'll tell me. He's a little bit more traditional.
Yeah.
I've had so many. That's the other thing with moving is you have to set up your medical with different physicians and dentists, and there's so much to it, right? But anyway, so we were there. He turned out fine. He actually had another open heart just up at Children's in Salt Lake.
I was just going to say, how many has he had? Because in that first year, don't they have multiple? Or is it the first couple years?
Yeah, it's depending on the defect. So for him, they just closed the right and left ventricle, and then he had his pulmonary valve. They kept that open. So he hadn't had a valve for 12 years, right? They just said, we're just going to watch your blood flow. And so he got his first valve put in here in Salt Lake, which was exciting. And that was 5 years ago. So that was 5 years ago. And then he'll just continue the rest of his life watching that valve, how strong it is, his blood flow. He'll keep having new valves put in for the rest of his life. But
lucky for him now, they have so much stuff like the watches. The watches tell you what your heart is doing exactly. And, my husband, he'll be swimming laps and all of a sudden he'll get out and his watch, it's counting his extra beats, or his skipped beats go to extra beats, and so it'll double on his watch, and he'll get out of the pool. I remember he called me and he's like, and it's triple the heartbeats he should have had, and he's like, I'm going to the emergency room. But anyway, there's just so many things now for the technology that's such blessings.
Yeah, definitely. That was a huge, huge blessing to be there. Yeah, so we were off base in that tour. And then we went to Alabama. We went down there. Tom had gotten the Air Force paid for 2 of his masters, which was awesome. So that was another schooling, and we knew that would be, I think it was 11 months. And I had a baby there. So remember, that was 4 years though, so it's too crazy. So this was number 5, another boy. And it is so funny because, listen, you adapt to where you live. So Alabama had, I love Alabama. It had fried foods.
Oh, yeah.
It had, my doctor was like, I mean, I think that was the biggest I had been with any of the pregnancies. I was eating out Chick-fil-A and Brewster's ice cream. Like, that would be my one meal that I could get down. I don't know how, whatever. So I gained so much weight, and I kept asking the doctor with number 5, I'm like, listen, do I have gestational diabetes? Am I at this point? And he's like, no, you're fine. You're totally normal, because most of the clients
are big.
It just was. And he was, anyways, so that was such a fun, quick little place. But he was in school again. And I remember that's the other thing. You want the best for your family. And so the education down where we were, my kids were, because they started in Massachusetts, then to Virginia, and then down to Alabama. And you just, and I'm not knocking on any parts of the country, but you realize and you get to see the strengths and the weaknesses of different places. And so they were probably ahead 2 years academically in Alabama. And it was different there. They still had where you could, paddle the kid and put your head down, and there were whistles in the school and things like that. And so my kids, I was like, okay, this was my first venture of homeschooling. And so I did that. So I put
with 5 kids.
Well, so I was pregnant with number 5. So the first 2 I homeschooled. And then I had one I paid private school for. And then the other one was just home with me. And then 5 was on the way. And it's really funny to hear what they're like, Mom. And I just have to take it, right? Like, and here's the thing with young moms, your kids are going to come back and remember.
I always wonder this.
And it is their reality. And and this is why I'm so thankful for the mindset coaching, right? Because I'm in a phase in my life now that if I didn't know how to handle things coming my way, I would be offended all the time. I would be upset with myself. I mean, I would be creating a negative loop minute by minute, So anyways, they remember it being, it was fun, but they remember me being on the bed a lot and just kind of telling them what to do. And they remember me being huge and eating and it's just funny. But yeah, they're like, we never want to homeschool again. That was horrible, so that was their experience.
I love that you said it like that they have that, put it in perspective to me. And it's so simple that our kids have their own reality. And that's so true. And
we have to honor it.
We have to honor it. It's not them. It's just like me saying, I get so frustrated when I'm trying to have a conversation with Rick, my husband, and I'm trying to openly express a feeling or a need that I have, and having him instantly shut it down, get on the defense, say that act like I'm telling him he's wrong or he's bad. And I'm like, no, I'm just expressing, that would be the same thing as one of my kids sharing with me that they have this reality, that they have this feeling, and me being offended and defensive and shutting them down and not acknowledging that they are allowed to have their own. So I love that you just said it. That was so simple and so beautiful. Our kids have their own reality.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that was, where am I at? Alabama.
Yeah, Alabama with 4 and 1 on the way. I want to know how big you actually were, because I gained 60 pounds. You know how small I am.
Yeah,
and I gained 60 pounds with all of my kids.
Yeah, I was about between 50. Well, I was usually 50 with each kid. I think this one was 60. Now listen, that's why I can really tell women when I personal train. Listen, I have tipped. I have been in the 200s.
Yep.
I've been down to the low 120s. So I knew I was so big when I was sitting in church with the kids, and I put my arm around my husband, and he was so small inside of me, and I thought, this is a whole new level of largeness, right? I was like, because he was fit.
Yeah.
thin, and and here
You
I
had
am,
perspective.
massive.
No one
I
wants
was like,
perspective.
I just remember that, him cuddling it, and I was like, "You're a little man inside of this," So let's see. I want to say I was. I'd have to go back and look at my journal. I know I was probably about 200 pounds.
Yeah.
And I remember after having that baby, my first workout, since I'm so into fitness, and that was.
I bet that was hard.
That was hard. It was in the dark. It was at night. And I remember putting 2 sports bras on because I love nursing. And that was one thing I would never, ever give up. It just worked out for me. And that was the way I went with each of the kids. Two bras on, shirt, shorts. And I remember running down the street in the dark because you have to time when you can get your whatever's in as a mom. Crying so hard, right? Like, here we go. You can do this. It's a reset. Here we go. And so I just have so much empathy for women, especially in personal training and fitness and nutrition and mind, all of it together. It's so important to look at what we do have. I was able to provide food and nutrients and all types of protection and for my child that I was nursing, and I was sitting there crying because I was large. But there's so much that we as women give. We're constantly changing, right? Just to get back into our own bodies, like hormonally. And that's it. That's a whole change in itself every month. And, and then the menopause. And so we're always changing. And
I call it the metamorphosis, women. And it's funny to me because it's so ironic that women are so nervous of change, or you hear people say, I hate change, or I don't like change. And I'm like, you are literally changing all the time, all the time. That is all women do. We change. We're a girl. Then all of a sudden we're a woman. Then all of a sudden we're married. We're a wife. Then all of a sudden we're a mother. Then all of a sudden we're, on and on and on. And I said, if women were butterflies, we would have changed into at least 10 different butterflies in our lifetime, right? Because the metamorphosis the only constant in a woman's life is that she will always be changing and starting over. Yes. Because my third baby, that was totally different for me. It was a C-section. It was 18 hours of labor into an emergency C-section. My body was just like, nope. The doctor said, sometimes your bodies just forget. They think they're done and they forget. And it was so traumatizing. I don't know if all of that together, combined, accumulated, whatever, turned into the postpartum depression. But it wasn't even depression. It was, I knew what it was. It was depression, but I knew I could identify it. I knew I was not right. I knew I was not me. And I was having a battle with myself every day in my mind, but I could identify it. I knew it. I could say to Rick, I have this going on. Like, I remember the nurse, the very first time I realized it, the nurse came in and I had done everything. Everyone knows my Instagram and Pure Imperfection. I had all these cute little outfits sent to me from these different brands, and I had his little name plate ready for him, and to do the, the perfect little swaddled or perfect little in the outfit with hello, my name is. And I sat there and I couldn't. I wasn't sad. I wasn't upset. I just couldn't. There was zero chance of me having any ability in myself to care enough to do that. And the nurse came in and she said, are you okay? And I don't think I was upset in the way that I was like crying or anything. And she said, are you okay? I think she was just talking to me. And I said, it's so weird. I know that this is happening right now. And she's like, well, let's get him dressed. Give me the outfit. I'll do it. And she just took over and did it for me. And she sat there and took some pictures of him. And I was like, I don't care. Like, okay, sure. I don't care. Right. And now I'm like, thank her. Like, bless her heart. Thank you for that woman. Thank you for all of the women. I mean, all of them. I was not leaving that hospital days earlier. You get your 5 days and I'm like, nope. They're like, you're ready to go, aren't you? And I'm like, no, that I know what's waiting for me at home. I'm not leaving. This is where I need to be. And I'd just be walking him around, pushing him around, walking, whatever. But I remember bringing that back to where I I remember the very first time my friend Shaylee, and some of my listeners have heard me tell this story, or my members, and my friend Shaylee, she sent me her ab workout, her ab challenge. She does her monthly ab challenge. And I was like, and this is my very first time of dealing with a C-section, right? And I even said to the doctor, what an idiot. I even said, Dr. Lump, please be so careful. I worked so hard on those, right? Like, you know, I worked so hard on this body, and I know that it fluctuates, and I love being pregnant, and I love being 50 to 60 pounds heavier, and I love nursing my babies. I'm just lucky and fortunate that when I nurse my babies, I am like in the negatives of calories. I cannot get enough calories, right? But so I had actually even said that to him. So the fact that she sent me this ab workout and I was trying to do it and I couldn't even do a crunch. I could not. And my brain was like, you can do this. You know how to do this. And my body was like, absolutely not. And I just laid on the floor and cried and sobbed that there was such a mind over matter. I mean, really, that's what it was.
You've got your subconscious and conscious mind, you know, and maybe we'll get into that a little bit today.
Yes. And it was so hard for me. But what's interesting is, like you're saying, it is subconscious and unconscious, because I could identify that there's a disconnect. I know where the disconnect is. It's the physical body and the mind working against each other. But anyway, wow, we kind of took a right turn.
Well, that's what motherhood is, when you start bringing in these stories about babies and recovery and shifting, and you know, it's hard not to go down that
Oh
path.
yes, and that's why I love all these stories, hearing all these stories of you going from Southern California to Dayton, Ohio, to Concord, Massachusetts, to Virginia, to Alabama, to, you know, it's like we do these things all the time in our lives. Maybe we're not packing up and moving to a new home, but we're constantly 4 times a month changing what's going on in our bodies and what's going on in our lives. And, you know, women, I think they just don't recognize it as big changes because it's something that's been happening since the beginning of time, right? So we don't acknowledge it as, oh, this is a big deal. Well, it is a big deal. It's happening. Something is changing who you are all month long.
All month long.
All month long.
Every day. Even what we eat, how much sleep we get, what kind of conversation we had with someone. There's so many, you know, facets to feeling good and to balancing yourself, I guess, so to speak. But
so I don't keep us here forever. The reason, my listeners, I wanted this beautiful woman to share this journey, and she's not even done with it. She has 2 more kids to get through. How many more states is 2 more kids going to be for us?
I'll just wrap that up.
But
so,
I wanted
Alabama.
I wanted to reiterate that I asked her specifically to tell me about this part of her life and this journey that she was on, because this is something that happens to so many men and women that serve our country, that sacrifice and put themselves in these situations for us, for our country, for our freedoms, and it's under attack all the time. You know, these men and women and their families are constantly under attack. Thank goodness there's enough of us out here that support, but it shouldn't be there's not enough of us. It should be every single freaking person in this country should be respectful and thankful to any person that decides to serve for this country, right? And especially their family that gives up their time, their, you know, their livelihood, their everything for it.
Well, I've asked the older kids, you know, because they've been through my 2 olders, like, what was it like as we call them military brats, right? And my oldest was like, I wouldn't change a thing, but it was so hard, Mom. Like, I got to see places and do things that no other kid, and I knew how to integrate myself into uncomfortable situations and make new friends. And I think my son said that too. He was really athletic, and I remember, there's so many stories. I remember South Carolina, one of the places we were at. I dropped him off at practice, middle school. It's an interesting age. we were definitely the minority as Caucasian there. And I remember him nobody said hi, and he was probably the only white kid, one of 5, I don't know, on the field. And I remember crying, leaving him. You have to do this on your own. You have to grow. Oh, I wanted to take so many times. I wanted to rescue my kids, but I didn't. And so I think anyways, he ended up being the quarterback that year and won the spot. And they called him what'd they call him? The Oreo, black and white. Like he was a shifty, like a black guy, but still white. Anyways, it's just, they learned cultural differences. They saw some racism towards themselves. But I mean, and again, from white to black to white, we saw that because we moved to the South. I'll just go quick. Where were we? Idaho? No, Alabama. Okay, then we moved to Idaho. My husband was deployed. Oh my goodness, in the middle of nowhere. That was a mountain home, so it's just below Boise. We had our 6th baby there. And so that was interesting. I could spend all day. There's so many stories. So if anyone wants to talk to me in private, like, hey, have you ever had this situation? I would take any call because I may have felt that way. Maybe not, but I can at least empathize with any of your members. So Idaho, and husband was deployed most of the time. He was a commander, and then he went to being and commander. You are tied at the hip with the phone. You go in, and it's just it's really intense. So deployed, then on to being a commander. And then we moved to Florida. And you know how you're talking about just honoring the families? I remember integrating one of my boys into the school system. We were in a neighborhood. We weren't on base. And I had a teacher that just couldn't understand him and his, I told her, he has moved so many times. This is the way I know him. I'm his mother. This is the way he learns well. And I just remember having to fight for him, and I had to end up going to the principal saying, hey, she's right in everything. There's not one positive thing in his notebook. He comes
you
home
had to
every day.
advocate for him.
I had to advocate for so I had to learn different school systems, things like that. So, and as a young mom, if you're just starting out with these babies, you have a voice. If you don't feel good, I remember going to one of the physicians with my cardiac baby, right? We had moved to Florida, and he said, you need to put your son on this medication. And I said, is it necessary? Why? He says, well, it's new, and we're trying this, but if I were you, and I'm a good parent, I would definitely have my child on this. And he says, and I don't think you'd be a good parent if you didn't. I said, well, I'm not, and I want a second opinion with someone else. And you're right. So I had to learn to advocate for myself. It's scary. And so I've had I'm not knocking the medical field. I know that it's there for a purpose, but you also have to know as a mother, if you get any type of second guessing, don't question that.
Yeah, we have intuition. We have the
with
intuition for a reason. We have that
Yes.
6th sense. It's weird. It's there for a reason. You have it. There's just something that tingles in us. Our spider sense goes off, and we're like, that doesn't feel right. Jan, my mother-in-law, actually talked about this in her episode when she had to decide what to do with her husband, who had basically a sinus infection, went up into his brain, an aneurysm. And they were living, it was the military. I think they were on base in New Mexico. I'm trying to remember what she said. But anyway, and she said, I'm 25 years old and I'm so stupid. And I'm just accepting that everything they're saying was what needed to happen because I'm so stupid. I'm 25. I'm 7 months pregnant and my husband hasn't been able to be coherent with me. So she's under so much duress, so much trauma, and she's expected to make decisions. So she said, all I could do was trust, right? That I was doing the right thing. He was in the right hands. And we actually had that same kind of situation happen with Rick's grandpa, with Jan's dad, with same thing. And it was kind of like, these doctors, which again, we all know Western medicine and what it is and what it provides and technology. And we're so grateful for those kinds of things. However, people are people, right? Mm-hmm. Humans are humans. Rick and I have an experience with his health that we were like, are you kidding me? Mm-hmm. But A couple, actually. But you still have humans. You still have humans that have personalities, that have egos, that have I'm better than all of you, or these God complexes even, you know? I mean, you still have that stuff. So if you're this mother, like you're saying, and you have something like that, like we all went through with vaccinations, like women have been going through with, or families have been going through with all vaccinations since they started. I mean, that's such a hot topic, you know, vaccinate or not even COVID. It's like just having your kids in school, they have to be vaccinated, right? It's such a hot topic. And for some moms, it's a spidey sense, right? It's a thing. And like you're saying, I love that you looked at him and had that ability to be like, no, I don't trust you. And look at how much better off we are from coming out of what we just came out of. And all of us that had this sense to kind of go, anyway, we won't, that's going to be a, whoa, Gina, you went there. I went there. Okay. Yes, I went there. Yes, I have to ask you something in the middle of this. Can we record another episode?
Yes, absolutely.
Can we do a different one? Because this one I feel like is being so well formed by itself that if we just piggybacked into what we actually came on here to talk about, it's a whole separate episode. This is such a beautiful, I love this journey. I love you sharing how the community, if right when you started, you had to deal with your own seclusion to be able to best take care of your family, but then you realize what it takes to be part of community and why it's important is engaging. You have to make the decision. You have to make the choice. You have to make the choice to either engage and be, I call it an active participant in your life rather than a spectator, right?
Can I say one thing about
Yeah,
that
absolutely.
too?
Hop in there.
The other thing, too, with that is we have to look at other people and they integrate in different ways, right? So we have different personalities. So I had no problem making eye contact, talking to some, you know, that's fine. But some people show connection or how to integrate into a community different ways. They may serve quietly or they may be the way, like to be able to, when you're moving so much in the military, if you can give everybody, what am I trying to say? The
respect their personality needs.
Respect their personality and give them, I can't, the phrase isn't coming to me right now, but you just give them the benefit of the doubt. And you know, instead of looking at someone, so like if we had a coffee or something on base and there's someone in the corner quiet or doesn't dress a certain way or whatever it is. So that is the one thing about the military. If we can take the blinders off and see what they have that's good to offer, at least they're there. Everybody has something good to offer in a community, but it may not be one of your strengths. And so that's what I had to learn is like, what, even if someone was really nasty, I mean, I had, being a commander's wife, you're called the key spouse and you have to handle all of the women. And so I was the example, right? Everybody looked at me and I told Tom, where were we? We were in Idaho. And I says, this is what I can provide as your spouse. I can't be at everything, but I had to tell myself, because we lived in a cul-de-sac where it was all the commanders of special forces, finance, pilot, right? So there's all these commanders and their spouses and their families. And I was having my 5th baby and I couldn't show up at everything, but I appreciated the women that would not judge me for that, like she's honoring her family, or she, you know, because most families had 2 kids, maybe 3, and we were the biggest family on the block, right? So I love that most of those women honored where I was at. Like that's so important in any community you're in the Revitalized Womanhood. It's so important to just see the goodness in everybody, and it may not be what you're offering, and that's okay. That's what makes it unique and authentic. So I just wanted to throw that
I
out
love
there.
that because I'm trying to reiterate that here with my listeners, but with my members specifically, because I think people don't think that they have something special to give. And it's like, you know what? We have a purpose here on life, or on this planet, in this life. We have a purpose. We were put here by, whatever higher power you want to talk about. I'll go back to my LDS roots here and say that we were created by God with specific gifts, with specific talents to make a specific impression at the specific time when it was most needed, right? We were supposed to be here to get these other babies here to do the same thing. They have a specific gift, a specific talent, whatever. You have I don't want to say, what is it called? A predetermined, is that the word? Predetermined reason. I don't want to say that, because we don't. We have our free will and we have our choices. We make our choices. But if you can see yourself the way that your God sees you, in Christianity, the way that your God sees you as this beautiful, Ed Milet said it so beautifully, and I was shocked when I heard it, but I loved it. And he said, I think I said it in my mom's episode too. He said, when I start having self-doubt or talking bad about myself, I think about, what would my Heavenly Father say to me? What would he say about me? What he would say, he would give me nothing but the most cozy hug and love and support. And you know what I mean? He would fill my soul and my heart with all of the goodness that he thinks and knows I am. And I think, how can me, talk bad about myself when he would not do that? He would not allow that. He would not want me to be talking bad about myself, right? So whatever angle you come from with that, even if it's just the universe, you're here and you have gifts, right? You have these qualities, these abilities. I'm not saying that everyone needs to be this outgoing force like me. I'm saying you might need to be uncomfortable and do that to be able to maybe help get your gifts through. But you have something that needs to come out and needs to be shared. And I'm just like, let's help you realize that. It's there. We don't need to find it because it's there, but maybe you need to realize it or accept it.
Yep. That's what we talk about in mindset coaching. Be open and be curious, right, with yourself instead of angry or fighting. Any of those negative words don't bring in growth. You're either stagnant or moving backwards. And so honor the talents and the gifts that you have, right? Don't fight them. But it's the how to, sometimes people say, just do this and you'll be fine.
It's hard.
Well, how? Mm-hmm. How do I be what does a successful military wife, what does that look like?
Yeah.
And so it looks different for everyone. My story is just my story. And there's a lot of things in here that I haven't shared, right? That, it's an up and down. But to me, I look at it as a time of growth. Again, going back to the tears, watering the seeds. You have to grow step upon step upon step. And I think that's kind of what we did with each place that we lived in. I grew a little bit more, and maybe not in the same way, right? Maybe I learned how to connect with this child with this move. Like, you need to be open with how you're going to grow. We don't just grow in one way. There's so many ways, physically, emotionally, spiritually, you name it. There's so many different ways to grow, but I don't want to take any more time with it. So where were we? Florida, South Carolina, then here in Southern. Where do we live? Where am I? Oh,
St. George.
That's what I'm like.
I'm in Utah. I'm somewhere.
Where do I
Florida
live?
to South Carolina. Ooh, you had your journey to me. I'm just like, I love it so much. We got to, we did the 3-month road trip of the U.S., which was super funny because I have my bucket list of places that I wanted to see, and I've been to over 40 countries, and I've never been to Washington, D.C. I've never been to the Boston, Massachusetts. I've never been to Vancouver. I've never been, I have these funniest, and so we did that 3-month road trip, and I loved it. And we knew we've road tripped all these other countries. We've road tripped on all these other continents. And it's like, we need to do the U.S. because it's everything that we're seeing over there and loving and growing from and experiencing the food, the culture, like you're saying down south. Oh my gosh. So fun.
Yes.
So fun. My kids living through and experiencing, not living through like so dramatic, but like hurricane warnings, like, oh my gosh, all the time. The tornado warnings, tornado warnings were just constant. We were in New Orleans and we were staying on the Mississippi River, and the Airbnb place that we were staying at, they were all kind of made out of these cargo containers. It was a really cute little spot, and they were made out of those. But they're like, okay, when you hear the air raid siren, or the siren, not air raid, but when you hear the siren, you need to come and get in this storage container, this cargo container. And I'm like, I'm not locking myself in a storage container. We will be floating down the Mississippi River in that thing. I'll take my chances out here. But they're just used to it. It's like, it's precautionary. You're going to be fine. But this is where you go. Just in case, this is where you go. But all these experiences were so fun. So for you going through, we're going to have to go to have coffee, because going through Southern California, Ohio, Massachusetts, Virginia, Alabama, Idaho, Florida. Oh my gosh. All of these are cultural shocks, because you think going to, we know in Utah, it's such a culture. You go from Australia to the UK. It's a culture shock. It's different. You know that, right? You think about that, but you can just go from one part of Texas to another part of Texas, and it's like, whoa. Totally different people. I think that's so fun. And I do love that aspect of your kids embracing that they got those opportunities. So fun.
It was a lot of fun. Yeah. So now we're working on the younger two, right? They were mostly, Florida, South Carolina, and here that they can remember, but it's important for us to travel with them or to remind them there's so much out there. Like, don't get too comfortable here. That's why traveling, even if you can't afford to travel, you can adventure through the internet, or, with just educating your children that, look, there's so much more out there.
Did you know that Shakespeare never went anywhere? He wrote about these places. He wrote about Verona. He wrote about all of these different places. He never went anywhere. He never experienced them in real life. He just only read about them or heard people talk about them. And he wrote so well.
Yes. And that's what I'm saying. So the younger two, I homeschool classical learning, and we just look at paintings, or a lot of it's European writers that we're learning about, but just the language and the way they can explain things, and that's a whole nother topic with education. We won't go there, but just the things that you can teach them at home, just to really. So now when we look outside and there's cloud cover, have you been watching the cloud cover here for the past few days?
It's crazy. It's been
so
beautiful.
Cool.
Yes.
Yeah. So just to acknowledge, just the beauty that we have around us is amazing. I don't know how we got onto that. But,
Well, also, I am hoping to dive into more homeschooling topics with people, because even in just the homeschooling community, there's different, there's different mindsets, many different. And honestly, I was explaining to one of my members, she's kind of thinking about it, and she's got this scenario with her son. And I'm like, you know what? She's putting so much pressure on herself that it needs to look a certain way. And I'm like, it doesn't. Go outside. And today we learn about bugs. Today we learn about dirt. Today we just go on a nature walk and pick up the different leaves. Today oh my gosh, there's so many things. Everyone's like, did you homeschool your kids while you were traveling? And luckily they were young enough that Castle had been in school enough that he was 2 years ahead. So he was fine. And Hayes, he was just too young. But I'm like, I world schooled. What 3-year-old says that the Eiffel Tower is in Paris? Any of them could. All you have to do is teach them, but we would go to the different countries and they would learn hello, goodbye, please, and thank you in the language of the country we were at. Switzerland, that was hard because they have 4 languages. So it was all of them.
Yeah.
But so there was constants that we required, and we would teach them about the, what are they called? The, not landscapes, markers, the whatever was there that was famous. Oh my gosh, my brain, but we would teach them about, okay, here is the Pisa. That's what it is. And here it is. And this is what it is. And we'd do tours and do, what are they called? Informational tours, like carriage rides. And the little guy tells you about where you're driving through and what families were influential at that time. And this is where Da Vinci lived when he was doing this schooling and training of the planets and whatever. And so, yeah, I mean, it doesn't have to look like anything. My little boy at the time was so into, he was 2, and he was so into roly-polies and bugs and all the things. And we were on Saint Michel, that island that Tangled is modeled after, Tangled, the Disney movie. So the island is out there in the middle of the water. So when the tide goes out, you could walk out to it. But when the tide comes in, you can't. It's an island, right? And so we were out there, and it's all concrete, basically, because it's this island. So we're up at the little church at the top of it. It's all concrete. Everything there, it's concrete. And Hayes finds this one teeniest little weed growing through the concrete. And I'm like, that's so cute. Honey, you're not going to find anything. It's just a little weed. And by damn, 2 roly-polies. He had 2 roly-polies he sat there and just played with in this concrete island, he found. And I'm just like, good for you, buddy. Like that just, it's such a silly thing, but that memory for me, and I have the picture of it, and it was just like, he taught me, right? He taught me to look deeper. All I see is a weed, but he knows there's a roly-poly under there, and he's going to find it, And it's just, they can teach us too. Homeschooling isn't just us teaching them. It's them teaching us to see things in a different perspective. Yeah, I know, don't mind me. I kind of go on little like right, left. Now we're going this way.
No, that's how we're wired. But I was just saying, what you look for, you'll find it, right? So that's a lesson that I just learned from that little story. If you're going to look hard enough, you're going to find what you want. And I just think relationships are, I had a friend when I started homeschooling, she said, Lisa, it's just building relationships. I didn't know what that meant for a couple of years. And I'm still learning, and we may not stay in the homeschool the whole time. It's just, I'm open. Again, if we're open and curious with our situations, with where we're at, we can always, like you say the word pivot, right? Quite a bit. We can always pivot. That's the most amazing thing. And then I go back to America. This is the land of the free, the brave, that, let's honor where we live, take advantage of it. We have so many options with our families on how to raise these kids and how to be better spouses. There's just so much information. But I think the bottom line with the military, I tell my yoga class. If you want to be strong, learn to enjoy being alone. And some people might be offended by that, right? Like we do need human interaction. I understand that, and I know that's important, but I'm looking at more as a growth tool. If a lot of people get very uncomfortable sitting with themselves alone, quiet, how often and how long can you do that? Because what happens, right? We start to hear the inner voice. And so I guess on the journey of we'll segue into it as another session, but with the mindset coaching, I kind of took that with my yoga people to the mindset of, if you want to love yourself, learn to listen and learn to sit and get curious, right? So it's all kind of the same. So I would just tell these sweet women who have just dove into the Revitalized Womanhood, like, that's an amazing step, because you're creating growth, right? And it doesn't matter where we're at, we can always continue to grow. We're in charge of ourselves. And so even though we're going, and I had some really hard things happen in the military. We don't have time for all of those things today, but you make a decision, right? If you really want to love yourself, learn to listen. And that might be to slow down. There were tours that we had that I was just slow. And I had to slow down, and I had to listen to myself. My husband was a commander, and I didn't show up for some of the things, but I showed up for what was most important at that time. And so if we can do that, learn that as women, that the external doesn't matter. What matters is listening. Really, just if you want to love yourself, give yourself the gift of slowing down, listen, sit with it, get curious, and then, move forward. And the forward step doesn't have to be big. It could be lifting the toe, not even taking a full step, right? It's just perpetuating forward a little bit. So,
do you know that you just fed me the perfect segue to end this? You just fed it to me beautifully. You didn't even know it was there. My motto for my community is 2023 focusing on me.
I love it.
That's mine because it's the philosophy of the oxygen mask in the airplane, right? I'm not telling you to be selfish. I'm not saying, oh no, it's all about me. This is the year of me. No, I'm not saying it like that. I'm saying you have to be able to figure out who you are, figure out what makes you tick, figure out how can you be expected to have these healthy relationships with your spouse, with your children, if you don't even know who you are. I can't. I have to learn who I am and be strong and secure and happy and healthy. I can't be expected. I know for a fact, if I am, listen to my episode tomorrow, you're going to love it. It's that Leah that I want to get you connected with. Okay. So I know for a fact, if I am in whatever phase of my cycle that month, if I am not getting enough sleep, if I'm not eating right, if I'm usually starving, right? We're usually running and starving, and we're eating what's left off the kids' car seat or tray, like, you know what we are. And I know for a fact that that's going to cause, and I'm pulling myself in too many directions. I'm said I'll do too many things. I've agreed to help with the PTA, or I'll be a room mom or whatever. You are going to have burnout. You are going to fight with your husband. You're going to fight with your kids. You're going to be your worst self. Mm-hmm. Acknowledge those things. Yes. Recognize if I don't get a good night's sleep, I'm going to be damaging my relationships, myself. If I don't get enough nutrients or the food I need, I'm going to be damaging myself, my relationships. Focusing on me. 2023, focusing on me. So that is our motto for this year, for the Revitalized Womanhood, Sisterhood, all of it.
I love it.
Thank you so much. Oh my gosh, I'm going to call you right now so we can set up this next one, because listeners, ladies, you cannot even believe she has so much goodness to bring to you. I've got it all sitting here, all of your handouts from our retreat, and I was so excited to go into them. But man, I felt inspired that we needed to talk about that today. Your journey in the military, and remind everybody, I'm pretty sure everybody that listens to me feels the exact same way I do and you do, and we appreciate and support and love all of our military. And so, yeah, thank you so much, sweetie.
The spouses and dependents are...
Oh my gosh, the families of them. My heart goes out to them even the most, because they're the ones doing the true. It's like the philosophy in business. You meet a man that is successful, powerful, amazing. And you know what I first think? He's got an amazing wife at home. He's got an amazing, because guess what? He could not be doing all of this amazing stuff without the support system that he has at home. And that's like our military, our men and women that leave and go do these things. They have an amazing support system at home. So we need to be the extensions of that support system. The rest of us, we need to be the extension of that, supporting these families and supporting these spouses, because that's the community. The community needs to branch out.
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. True. Okay, we'll get
Thank
on
you.
and
Thank you
schedule
so
another
much,
one.
friend. I really appreciate you.
You bet. Thank you for having me, Gina.